Wait a minute. Is that? Could it be? Oh my god. Oh, it's a Hemi Cuda. I thought it was going to be something cool like a Yugo. 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda, and don't you dare call it a Barracuda, but in the case you do, may the car gods have mercy on your soul, because the Mopar fanatics are going to skewer your little weenie like a kebab. A delicious little kebab. And that's because in 1970, the high-performance models were marketed as Cuda, which was a name derived from the 1969 trim package. And with the Cuda, you had a few absolutely delicious engine options. There was the 340, a 383, the 440 in both the 4-barrel and 6-barrel configuration, and of course, the absolutely erection-inducing 426 Hemi. But this isn't a joke, it's actually been studied. If you look at this official chart, you'll see that after only 20 seconds of exposure to a Hemi, the heat of your meat is at maximum, which is also termed a meat mountain. It's very scientific. Many people would argue that the 1970 Hemi Cuda is the most iconic muscle car of all time, but only a few short years later, the Cuda would meet its demise, and I guess it's true that all good things must come to an end. Kind of like Chumbawamba. Jeez, somebody get these guys a Grammy. Underneath that shaker hood, the 426 cubic inch Hemi is making 425 horsepower at 5,000 RPM and 490 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM, all with a compression ratio of 10.2 to 1. So unlike some of the cars from back in the day, the 70 Hemi Cuda definitely has the muscle to match its appearance. There were only 2 transmissions available with the Hemi Cuda in 1970. The first was a 4-speed manual, which is shown here, but our featured car has the 3-speed automatic, which is a 727, so it should be able to handle all that power from the Hemi just fine. Oddly enough, 323 gears were standard in the Hemi Cuda in 1970, and I guess you could say that's complete blasphemy. But you could opt for a set of 355 gears or 410 gears, and what do you think our featured car has?
410 gears!
The weight of the Hemi Cuda, it's okay. I always feel like these cars look really small in photos, but then when you see them in person, they're quite a bit bigger. Kind of like my personality. Regardless, this car with drivers coming in at 3,786 pounds. I'm sure it comes as no surprise, but the Hemi option was really expensive in 1970. The Cuda started out at $3,164, the Torque Flight was another $227, and then we get to the Hemi, which did come with the shaker hood and an upgraded suspension, but it was going to set you back $871.45. And you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound too bad, but when you compare it to the price of the 440 engine, which was only $250, yeah, that Hemi was a pretty darn expensive option for that year. Anyway, the absolute cheapest Hemi Cuda that you could get with an automatic transmission was going to set you back $4,262.45, and adjusting for inflation, that's $28,464 today. Hemi Cuda was rather rare in 1970. They only made 666 in total. Wait a minute. 666? Huh. Regardless, 14 were convertibles and 652 were hardtops like our featured car, and that makes this thing rarer than a sober person at Talladega.
Number 3, baby! Right here!
Motor Trend magazine tested a Hemi Cuda in May of 1970, and it ran 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds and the quarter mile in 14 seconds at 102 miles per hour. But I think we all know those are garbage times and that these cars have a lot more potential, and it just happened to be that same month that Cars magazine tested a Hemi Cuda, and even though this one was a convertible, it ran 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds and the quarter mile in 13.45 seconds at, get this, 115 miles per hour. And with a trap speed like that, it's pretty obvious that these cars have a lot more potential than even a 13.45. It's just that traction is a major limiting factor. It just so happens that earlier in 1970, Motor Trend had tested a car that blew away all of the times of the Hemi Cuda, and it was one that people didn't really expect. It ran the quarter mile in only 13.38 seconds at 105.5 miles per hour, and it was a Buick. To be a little bit more specific, it was a Gran Sport 455 Stage 1. And even though our Hemi Cuda's opponent is a 1971 Buick 455, with the minor modifications they allow in pure stock, this car has a lot more potential than you might be expecting. And while that Hemi Cuda is pure brute force, the Gran Sport 455 from Buick was a little more civilized.
Reveal your rectum! Let us see that butthole!
Let's talk about some numbers, shall we? The compression ratio for the 71 GS 455 was only 8.5 to 1, but it still managed 315 horsepower at 4,400 RPM and 450 pound-feet of torque at 2,800 RPM. But keep in mind, in pure stock racing, you can raise that compression ratio by 1.5 points, and if you do that with a Buick 455, you are talking some major horsepower gains. Either way, the Buick is a little bit outmatched by the Hemi Cuda in both horsepower and torque, but if that Cuda makes any mistake whatsoever, that Buick isn't going to show it any mercy. Kind of like this Phillies fan.
Grab the ball, this guy shoves her out of the way and takes it himself.
Yep, you see right there? Old lady hesitated, he came in and took home the W. Hey, welcome to Philly, no mercy. You could get a 4-speed manual transmission in the Buick, but most people went for the automatic, and that just happens to be what this car features. And you know it is the tried and true Turbo 400, so that thing will easily handle the torque of that monstrous 455. If you guys enjoy disappointment, which I suppose you probably do because you're still watching this video, the standard rear gearing in the GS 455 in 1971, when equipped with an automatic transmission, was 308. But you could upgrade to a set of 342 gears, but this car took it a step further with a set of 373 gears.
Yes!
Let's talk about the weight of that big old Buick. And I'm sure you guys are expecting me to say something well over 4,000 pounds, but this car is a little bit different. And I don't know how the owner pulls off this sorcery, but this thing with driver came in at 3,754 pounds. And that's not a mistake. This car routinely comes in at 3,700 pounds with its driver, and I don't know how they're pulling that off, but it is very impressive. The Buick definitely has the advantage when it comes to its original price. It started out at $3,285, and the automatic transmission was another $42.24. That gives you an absolute cheapest total of $3,327.24, and adjusting for inflation, that's only $21,286 today. If there's one thing I have to say about the Buick, it's that I'll never get tired of hearing a 455 run. Just check this out. Enough talk about this Triple B, big beautiful Buick. Let's see what it can do on the drag strip. Just some additional information, that day at the track it was 74 degrees with 80% humidity and elevation is 754 feet. And the Hemi Cuda takes the win.